Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it.
Excited to have on Benjamin, depending on the company that he's keeping, Wolf, who is an entrepreneur. He is a business consultant, and he is also not the author, but the adapter of two of the most fundamental works that I am kind of always reading, which is the works that have been adopted by Rabbi Moshe Weinberger of Woodmere, New York. He is a longtime fan of his. He's an author. He's the author of the very popular blog Dixiad, and just an overall impressive individual. We talk about the real spiritual changes that are going on in the Jewish nation, how he has an amazing story. He was raised Reform, found out he wasn't halakhically Jewish. Now he's a business guy that is fully embracing Hasidic teachings. Like it's a crazy story with a lot of very practical takeaways, and also like amazing ideas of what it's like to be a conduit for one of, in my opinion, the main thinkers of our generation, Rav Moshe Weinberger, someone who I find very inspiring and real, and is just a big general influence and impactor in my own life. So with no further ado, Ben Wolf. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this podcast has been brought to you by me, Jacob Rupp, and Jacob Rupp's Consulting, technically Lift Your Legacy. Now, I have to be honest, I help clients often get out of their own way. And something that has really held me up was exactly the same thing, that I was in my own way. For months, people have been saying, talk about your coaching, talk about how you help people, share it, etc. And I had a really hard time putting it out there. Why? Because it's not that I don't think I do a great job. I've seen amazing results from my clients, 10x, even more than that, businesses, fixed relationships, helped people lose a lot of weight, people go on the path of making goals and fulfilling their goals, all of these things. I know I do it. And I've been in the coaching space long enough to know that there's a lot of people that don't really deliver, and the ones that do really deliver are worth literally their weight in gold, because so often we're held back by stuff. And it's just like, if only I could get over that, if only I could work through that. And I help people do that. But for me, my big holdup was sharing that I do this in a big way, in a public way, especially on the podcast, because it's awkward. I don't want people to think, oh, I'm just making the podcast to sell you stuff or to talk about stuff. So that's not what I'm doing. My point is like this. My coaching business is expanding. I'm taking on a few more clients. If you are someone that is struggling in the area of self-esteem, goal setting, health, relationships, or your business, really, reach out. I don't know if we're a good fit to work with each other. What I can guarantee you is that we'll get on the phone for a half an hour. I'll hear the kind of challenges you're having. You'll get a good feel, if you don't know me yet, of the kind of work I do, kind of program I would recommend for you. And if it's a great fit, we'll move forward. And if not, not. But I wanted to appreciate very much from the bottom of my heart the fact that you guys all listen. I appreciate the amazing guests that I have. And I'm really thrilled to have broken through in my own life to the point where I could actually devote a segment to really make a somewhat long-winded, but I think very important advertisement. So if you want to reach out to me, the email is rabbi, R-A-B-B-I, Rupp @gmail.com. And the website is liftyourlegacy.live, and at lift_your_legacy on Instagram. I think it's pretty simple. You know where to find me because you found the podcast. Thank you so much. Ben Wolf, thank you so much for joining me. You are the founder and CEO of Wolf's Edge Consulting. But more importantly for me, you are the author of two of my favorite books, which are various collections of teachings from Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, who is the rabbi of Eish Kodesh in Woodmere, New York. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I would just clarify, I would say I adapted the teachings rather than authored them, just because they are based on the teachings of Rabbi Weinberger, and I'm adapting things that he said verbally, orally in synagogue on Shabbos, and adapting those to, you say one thing's in a written form and other things you say it in a different way orally. So adapting it to written form, but it's not my own work.
Absolutely. So you have an amazing story, and Nachum Siegel, who is also a guest on this show, interviewed you, and I would love to have people go over and see that background. Growing up as a Reform Jew, you found out you're not halakhically Jewish. You became more observant. You became a rabbi. You learned for 1,000 years, and now you're an entrepreneur living in Woodmere, New York, with your family. I think the first question that pops into my mind is, you've seen the spectrum of the Jewish world, really across the board, from the YU world to the, to all kinds of different things, and
right.
You've been involved in business now, in entrepreneurship. You're launching your own podcast as well. Why Hasidic Judaism? What was it, or what is it about Hasidic Judaism that most speaks to your soul now, and that you feel that you've, at least for this time, kind of come home and really found your stride, that it supports your Jewish spiritual life and also promotes your business and entrepreneurial ventures?
All right. Well, that's a nice 7 or 8 part question. So I'll have to figure out where to start. But I guess I would say, what is it that got me interested in big thought? Basically, initially, I would say that it comes down to something very similar to what got me interested in Judaism in general. Like I said, or like you said, excuse me, I grew up in a Reform Jewish home. I have wonderful parents, a great household in Nashville, Tennessee. I was involved. I went to Sunday school. I was confirmed. Went on our confirmation trip to New York. That was interesting. But the one thing that I noticed over the years, and I just thought this was a feature of Judaism, not a bug, was that whenever we learned the explanation of like why we do this, why do we do this ritual, why do we shake the lulav on Sukkot, or why do we do whatever it happens to be, it was always a very short, like one-line pat answer. It's to shake the lulav in the 6 directions to remember that God is everywhere, all around us, and that was it. And so from kindergarten to till confirmation in 10th grade, it was always the same thing. I just thought, okay, Judaism is a simplistic religion. It's very simple. And when I met some Orthodox kids for the first time when I was in 10th grade at this, youth group overnight weekend called a lock-in in Nashville, there were kids from the Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, all over the place. I was in the Reform Youth Group chapter board, and I met some kids there. And so I was a very open-minded liberal person. So of course that applied to Orthodox Jews as well. It's like kind of exotic. So, I asked them stuff. Why do they do this? Why do they do that? Why, and the answers that they give for why they did things were nothing like the simplistic answers that I had always had for whatever it was that I knew that we did. And that just blew me away. It was totally fascinating to me that these 9th, 10th, 11th grade kids, my own age, just had these thought out and explanations and back and forth and nuance, and it was just so much deeper than anything that I had been exposed to before. So Torah is deep. That was actually the initial attraction to Judaism for me.
Can I point out 2 points that I think are absolutely fundamental so that nobody glosses over that? I think the first point that you said, which is so important, is this idea of being open-minded to everything. And I think we live in a world where if you vote a certain way or you wear a certain color shirt or whatever it might be, it's like that's off limits. You can't look at those people as rational human beings. You just have to sort of justify their beliefs based on some kind of a fluke in their upraising. And you said, no, I'll actually talk to them. I think that's very important. And the other thing which is amazing is that I think in the world today, social media, whatever you want to say, that we're all looking for hacks, that there's someone out there that's going to answer something that you didn't know. And rather than that, it sounds like the biggest point of inspiration for you is realizing that it's really about seeing something that's internal, if you want to call it Judaism, you call it Judaism, Torah, this how you were raised, from a new light. So it's not like you had to go, to India to learn something else. It was just a matter of getting enough sophistication to look back at your own tradition, your own heritage, and kind of figure things out from there.
Right. And I mean, I didn't necessarily think of it at the time as being part of the same religion. I mean, I guess, yes, it's two flavors of being Judaism. It's like a different denomination. But I didn't really look at it as going back to something of mine. I looked at it as something out there. And, just like I'd be open-minded to learn about a Buddhist person and their religion. I say, okay, the Orthodox Jews too. That's very interesting. And it was actually that first night that it somehow, I don't remember how, came out in conversation like, oh, so according to that, you guys don't consider me Jewish at all, like because my mom converted Reform before I was born, and so you don't actually consider me Jewish. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, noted. I mean, I'm not Orthodox, so it doesn't mean anything to me, but very interesting. I mean, I wasn't like offended or anything. I was just like, okay, everybody has their beliefs. So again, just to sort of go back to your question, the thing that got me about Judaism was that it's deep. And then what I found was over the years, so I became, so then I became religious, and it was amazing. I went to NCSY, it was awesome. And then met lots of Orthodox kids all around. I went to Yeshiva University, then I went to Israel for the year, finished Yeshiva University. And throughout this whole process, I would see things in the Talmud, in the Gemara, or I would see these stories or these just cryptic statements. Or even Rashi or the Torah, and the Torah portion would say something that I was just like, I feel there's something going on. There's something more going on there. There's a deeper part of the story, I feel like, but I don't know what it is. I don't know how to decode it. And so then I would look at Rashi, the fundamental commentaries on the Torah. I would look on the Gemara. I would look at the commentaries on the Agadic portions of the Talmud. I would look looking at whatever commentaries I could find in the original Hebrew, in wherever I was, and nobody spoke about it. Everybody spoke about the Maharsha. Everything you look at Ein Yaakov was all going on the simple meaning of whatever it is, just telling you the simple meaning of the story without going into the deeper meaning of it. And I was like, okay, maybe I really feel like there's something more here, but nobody's talking about it, so maybe it's not really there. Maybe it really is this simple. And maybe it's not really hinting at something deeper. And then the first hint I got that there was really something more going on is a book that you do find in the more Lithuanian style yeshivas called Or Gedaliahu by Rabbi Gedalia Shor, who was the dean of Yeshiva Torah Vodaas, a well-known yeshiva in Brooklyn, and he had a kind of a Hasidic background, and he would explain things on the Torah portion that were just a lot deeper. It was like, hey, you know what? That's what I thought. That's something like, that's a little bit of what I thought was out there. And then around that time, I met my wife. We started dating, and she's like, oh my gosh, you have to go to this. You have to go to this rabbi. I go to hear him speak every Thursday night in the Young Israel of Queens Valley, in Kew Garden Hills, New York, and Queens, which is near where she lived at the time. And she's like, you got to go hear this rabbi speak. I go to him every Thursday night, Rabbi Moshe Weinberger. It's amazing. So I went, and I was okay, I went, we went in at separate times, so people wouldn't know a guy and a girl together, God forbid. And it was nice. And then I started working for an organization after we got married called Hashiveni with Rabbi Yehuda Zakatinsky. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them. And he was good friends with Rabbi Weinberger for a long time, and he got Rabbi Weinberger to come to his first couple of retreats. And since I was working for the organization, didn't have a lot of money because I was in Kollel and post marriage Judaic studies, and I went to this retreat, and Rabbi Weinberger was speaking, and I knew who he was because I'd heard him speak once, and it just blew me away. I mean, I could tell you the topics of some of the speeches he gave that over 20 years ago. It was unbelievable. It just blew me away, and I was like, this is what I thought was out there. Like this is what it is. And then shortly after that, so I went to more of his classes. I started to get into it. And then shortly after that, I moved to Des Moines, Iowa for 3 years to join the community Kollel of Des Moines. I started a college outreach program, started going to 4 different campuses. Some of them were almost 2 hours away from Des Moines where I was living. And so I was in the car a lot. Back in those days, there used to be this thing called tapes. I don't know if anybody ever heard of it, but I went on the website that the Rabbi Weinberger's people had, and ordered like 110 of his tapes. That's, again, something you had to do in the old days.
You went all in on this one.
Yeah, so I got like Well, I also went all in on Rabbi Yisachar Fran, just to be clear. I got 100 of his tapes too. But so I would go and I would drive all around Iowa to all these different campuses, and I would listen to Rabbi Weinberger's classes. I got like a selection of stuff that was applicable throughout the year, all the holidays, all the Torah portions. And it just honestly changed my life. It just changed my perspective on things. It taught a deep side of Judaism that I just hadn't heard anywhere else.
Okay, so I gotta stop you here, and I want to go back and sort of glean a couple of ideas from there. One thing that I think is incredibly important, and I think that there is a wide variety of people that can take this into account. You know, a lot of times as people become more observant, they want to reach a point where, okay, now I'm frum and I can just be like everybody else. I think that that sense of longing, that sense of, I know there's something more. I know I could be better. I could find that Rebbe if you want. That never disappeared. And I think had you just kind of said, this is the kind of Jew I am, or now I'm frum, so therefore I'm going to toe the party line, you would have never discovered this thing, which, like you said, not just change your life, but, and I want you to like explain a little bit more. What does a spiritually connected Jew look like? You know, for the newcomer, or for the person that, you know, learns Daf Yomi, nothing wrong with that, it's great, and goes to synagogue and, you know, checks off all the boxes. Is that what Judaism means? Is that what it's supposed to mean? Is that what your experience is? Or is there this like longing and this connection that you now have access to that you didn't necessarily before?
Well, you know, I guess to synthesize a little bit of what Hasidus teaches, what Hasidic teachings say, and what Rav Weinberger teaches is that kind of checklist Judaism that you're referring to. That it's just, you know, if all Judaism is to you is a checklist. Do this, don't do that. And as long as I could check off enough items on the checklist to feel socially acceptable in my community, or to feel that I'm not going to hell, then that's really all it's about. And obviously, from the, you know, Hasidic teachings, just saying that it's not what it's all about. It's about connection. It's about connection with God, and connection with all of the pieces, quote unquote, of God that are all around you, which is other people. So I guess, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but just to focus on one idea about what it means to be spiritually connected, or what I learned that it means is let's say, you know, let's just to take one fundamental example. I would say is, if you take the let's say you take the Rambam's Maimonides approach to the idea of providence, right? So the Maimonidean idea of providence, many other the Gaonim and authorities, is that there's kind of a universal providence that God has over species, and taking care of nations and species, and just on a very broad level, the laws of nature and setting it up, and that's it. There's no divine providence over the little details of every individual's life, even for Jewish people, even for whatever it is. But the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic movement, one of the things that he emphasized, and it didn't originate with him, but one of the things that he emphasized is the idea of divine providence over every detail, every detail of life, over every individual. And that's, you know, on one hand, at first glance, it may sound like, that's an interesting philosophical debate, very academic and interesting. But what does that have to do with my life? And the truth is, it affects, that difference in perspective affects every aspect of life. Because the question is, when you go through something, when you have an interaction with somebody, when you run into a problem, when you run into a crisis, or even a small problem in life, does that have meaning? Or is that just a fluke of the laws of nature? God set up a bunch of rules in advance at the beginning of creation, and does those rules just kind of happen to cause and effect, happen to lead to this moment? Or does that have meaning? Is there purpose in that? And so the idea of divine providence on every detail of life essentially means that everything's on purpose. Everything has a meaning and a reason. We don't always know what that reason is, and very often, especially the harder and more difficult topic we're talking about, we always have to say that we can't even imagine what the reason could be. Why should this happen? But let's talk about the 99% of life for most of us, which is not in that range, it affects life. There's a concept in this kind of goes that you asked earlier also about entrepreneurship and business and day-to-day life, and how does Hasidic teachings come into that? And I guess what I would say is that there's a concept in halacha, in Jewish law, called lechatchila and b'diavad, which means, lechatchila is how things should be done, the proper way to do something, and b'diavad is, okay, you didn't do it the right way, so whatever, you're stuck. Here's like this, plan B. Here's the second best way to do it, or the fifth best way to do it, and that's b'diavad. That's non-ideal. And so what we tend to think of is there's certain things, if you study Torah 16 hours a day until you're 58 years old, like that's lechatchila. That's the ideal way to live. And if you either don't have the head or the money to be able to do that, then you're kind of your whole life is basically just a plan C. It's just okay. Just try not to go to hell, basically. Just try not to mess it up too much.
And just to point out, because
not living an ideal life.
No, but and just to point out also how pervasive this concept is, that when you read stories about the great tzaddikim and how worried they were about the smallest sin, and you compare that to our life, it's not just like try to avoid hell. You're like, I'm going to hell no matter what. It's just like, how long do I want to burn for? Or, and I'm going to burn for a long time.
Try to keep it under 2,000 degrees, basically.
Right. Which even that you feel like, it's just the practical experience. And it's like, it's sad in a lot of ways, but it's very true. And I think this is how a lot of people's spiritual life is it's just like this resignation that you are really screwed up. God is really upset with you. And no matter what you do, it's not good enough. And I think that's a crucial point to at least call out, like you're saying, that so many of us, for whatever reason, have that mantra going through our mind, that it's no wonder that we look at Judaism and don't see, like, I don't want to learn more because I'm just gonna have to do more stuff or whatever it might be. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's it makes sense. And just what you're saying just reminded me of another story, because there are stories where you learn the opposite. There's a story, I forgot the name of the rabbi. There's a famous rabbi, Lithuanian style rabbi, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, and somebody saw him reading the newspaper on his stender, meaning on his little whatever book holder upper thingy. That you use usually for learning holy books, and he was reading the paper on it. A secular newspaper, and so somebody asked him, you're this great rabbi, why are you reading the paper? So he said that I'm reading the paper because I'm a leader of hundreds of people, and if I don't understand what's going on in the world, then I'm going to have trouble relating to them, and they're going to have trouble listening to what I'm teaching them. And so therefore I need to read the paper. It's like, okay, fine. So that's why you think it's not a waste of time for you, or inappropriate even for you to read the paper. But why do you have to do it on the stender? Why do you have to do it on the same object that you use to study all the holy books all the time? So he said, well, if I'm supposed to be reading the paper because I just told you why I have to do that, then that means it's God's will that I read the paper. And if I'm doing God's will, I'm doing a mitzvah. And if I'm doing a mitzvah, then shouldn't I do it on the stender?
I think that we're touching on something that is so absolutely crucial, and that I think has only gotten increasingly more challenging for people based on just the media, the ability to really like capture a certain perspective of someone's life, and that becomes their whole life, and the way that the guy
very, very two-dimensional, very one-dimensional.
Right. And so then a person that's multifaceted, it's like, it's not like my wife is thrilled for me to jump out of the bed at 4 a.m. and come home at 11 because, we have these 300 kids and someone has to help get them out in the morning, or, I need to exercise because my body's going to fall apart. And, it's like you have to hide that. There's this sense that we have to stuff our real selves into like under the stender. so to speak. And that concept is so phenomenal that Judaism was, again, from my perspective, never meant to flatten out and suck the life out of an individual, but rather to enhance and figure out that each component of your life, as it serves into a bigger purpose, is important and valid, and that's kind of up to you to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and when you take that into your life at home, or life at work, or life in the gym, or whatever it is, so then you take this, you have to take, or the idea of this, this Hasidic teaching, or this teaching based on the Baal Shem Tov, is that you're not looking at it that well, look, if I look at let's say you look at work, right? I was born with a certain set of proclivities, interests, talents, strengths, weaknesses, and upbringing, environment, parents, whatever. I was born with a whole set of factors that led me to be, or led me toward whatever field I ended up going into, or led me toward or away from this and toward that. And there's a whole set of factors. And if I understand that there's divine providence in every detail of life, then I understand that it's not a coincidence that I like running around and talking to people, so that's why I went into sales, as opposed to like sitting in front of a book, or being an analyst, or a stockbroker, or a rabbi, or whatever it is. But I'm a hyper guy. I love walking around talking to people, making connections, and that's what gave me kicks out of. So who do you think is the one that made you that way? That essentially ended up pushing you in that direction, that you went into sales as opposed to something more academic or cerebral. And so what that says is that so what that basically means is that it's God's will in my life and my circumstances for me to work in sales, to make to build the world and give other people a living, and just build the world and make things more constructive in the world through what it is that I'm doing every day. And that's not b'diavad, that's not plan C because I didn't have a head for the academic side. God's the one that made me like that. So that means it's His will that I be doing this. And you want to add something? As you lean forward.
It's so interesting to point out, and I'm curious if this. I think there's a certain amongst certain people a desire to reflect. Certainly when a person's thinking about the Hasidic concepts and Rebbe, to look a certain way and to be a certain thing. And what you're saying is so fundamental. I'm curious how, and I Rabbi Weinberg, is an extremely humble person in the sense that, I don't think he'd ever come on the podcast because he doesn't see his message is important because he's connecting with people, but he's a very humble person. And I'm curious, as a student of his, what was it about his unique style that rather than put on the kind of hat that he wears or grow the kind of beard that he has or wear the kind of coat that he has, you most embody his teaching by becoming someone that looks and does something completely different from him?
Well, anybody that has a connection with Rabbi Weinberger knows that, he would never say, or even unspokenly give someone the feeling that, well, once you get to a certain level and you get to a certain point and you really graduate, then you got to start putting on the long coat or start growing out the, long payas or whatever it is. No one would ever get that feeling because that kind of thing is, it's just external. It's superficial. It has a tremendous value, and there are reasons why those customs exist. And if you grew up that way, it would be kind of a rebellious statement, maybe to give that up, and probably better, unless there's a compelling reason, which many people do have a compelling reason, but probably better not to, just to stay the same externally, because it shows if I just continue, if I grew up wearing a long coat and payas and with a shaved head, then, if that's how I grew up, then to not change from that is essentially saying that my focus is on what's internal. I have no reason to change some random thing on the outside. By the same token, if I grew up wearing, colored shirts and, and whatever, clean shaven, then Rabbi Weinberg is going to be the last person to say that, well, well, he probably might say that you should at least have a trimmed beard, but I only grow hair like right here.
Right.
But what's it called? So, on the chin. But because some people are listening to the podcast, so I don't want to. But anyway, so the focus on the external. So he's not. I mean, just there's. I mean, you go to his classes. It just wouldn't occur to you that I have to look Hasidic like he does. It just is not something that would occur to a person.
One of the things that I also found fascinating, there's a whole, back and forth, this idea of neo-Hasidus, and as a person that put out his Torah, his books, in I believe it was a very mainstream Jewish publishing, you are sort of a catalyst.
It was self-published, but it was distributed by Feldheim.
So if you're having Feldheim distribute your work, you are bringing this perspective to mainstream Orthodox Judaism. Your books are in all of the major bookstores and online. And I guess the question is, have you felt pressure or backlash from this, I guess, kind of internal turmoil in the Jewish world about what is the best way, what is the best messaging to go out to reach people? Is it kind of the traditional system? Is this new thing? How have you dealt with? And has there been any kind of blowback to you publishing his books in such a mainstream forum?
I'm sorry. I don't. I haven't had any. I mean, I'm not a main proponent of anything that Rabbi Weinberger is teaching. It's, I don't know. I'm just not that important, I guess, in the movement out there. The only thing I personally experience is positivity, and it's additional connections and people reaching out. If they see, my blog where I posted, some of the Shabbos morning speeches, or the books, or whatever else. People see me in the Jewish Home every week, having adapted, his speeches. The only thing I ever experienced is positive feedback of people who just, in connections like with you, Rabbi Rupp, just to, people reaching out because I have some, just to, like, by transitive property, talk to this schlub who talks to Rabbi Weinberger. So then, I get a little bit closer to Rabbi Weinberger, I guess people think. So it's only benefited me and created more connections and opportunities. I haven't really seen the negatives. I mean, once in a while I see a Yeshiva World blog post with, with a toxic comment section or something like that, but not that often.
I wanted to make that explicit only because I believe that for so many people, especially someone like you or myself who did not grow up in the movement and have now this, massive channel called social media, that we're able to reach out and not just talk to our peers or our parents, but quote, the Orthodox world as a whole, that there is such a need to, I guess, toe the line and not necessarily speak about what actually works for you. And I guess it's just a tremendous sense of encouragement that this is something that touched your soul. This is something that touches your soul and it is a big part of your own personal journey and what makes you who you are now. And you didn't let that stop you from sharing it with everybody. And the end result is that I believe, again, I'm obviously extremely biased, but I think that the general conversation gets a lot better, and that we shouldn't be afraid as Bali Tshuva, as Gerim, as converts, as even as people that grow up in the system, to express our unique self of what works for us, what speaks to us. And there's a good chance that people would actually benefit from knowing about that.
Right. Well, I mean, the one thing I think I did do is I did a couple years ago publish some articles in Ami magazine and in Hamodia's magazine, Inyan, At Home with Inyan, and which are very kind of ultra orthodox, kind of right wing black hat publications. And I did publish some articles in there, and you do when you're actually really explicitly talking, not just to people who come find you and they seek you out, but you're actually going to them, their own publications on their turf. I think you have to be very circumscribed, and you have to realize that you need to take baby steps with people. And if they're coming from a different perspective, then you need to take baby steps. You need to just be more subtle, and maybe just tackle a small piece of the the issue without trying to take them too far. I didn't I think one of the articles, I forgot if it was in Hamodia or Ami, I think I might have even quoted Rav Avram Yitzchak Kook. I think I might have quoted Rav Kook by name even. I use his name. I don't know, but you have to just be you have to just give them little pieces at a time. You can't stretch people too far. You have to respect the fact that change is hard, and learning new perspectives is challenging for anybody. Myself as much as anybody else, and to take people slow. Don't try to push them too hard, or take some extreme position and then blame the other guy for like, oh, why can't you be more open-minded? No, of course you can't. You're doing too much too fast.
Okay, amazing. Ben, I want to respect your time. Please tell the listeners how they can find out more. I know that you have an exciting podcast that is out or coming out, and all of the other ways they can find your amazing content and the work that you do transcribing Rabbi Weinberger's.
Okay, so I'll just say that I guess just on the Jewish side, not posting that much right now, but you could see a lot of stuff from Rabbi Weinberger since 2006 on my blog, which is Dixie Yid. Again, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, so in honor of that, I named the blog Dixie Yid. So if you just Google Dixie Yid or go to dixieyid.blogspot.com, you can see about that. And on an entrepreneurial side, I do have a consulting company where I help companies do similar to what I was involved in my last company, where I joined a healthcare startup, a pre-launch, until we grew after 3 years to the largest and fastest growing home care startup of its type in the patient-directed home care space throughout all 62 counties of New York State, with in-person coverage and 130 employees. After 3 years, it was very successful. So we used a system of tools and processes called Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. So I have a consulting business now where I help other companies to reach to the next level, to get traction, stop treading water through that system. And that's Wolf's Edge Consulting. So you can check me out at wolfsedgeconsulting.com. So I guess that's it. Dixie Yid and Wolf's Edge Consulting. That's it.
Amazing. Ben, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rabbi Rupp. It was a pleasure.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.